All right. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for your patience. I think that we are all here and accounted for now, and we're going to go ahead and get started with the meeting. Today is Wednesday, March 16th, and we have several election law bills that are on our agenda for today. I just want to do a quick sound and sight check. You all are able to see and hear me since I had to switch up my computer. Okay. All right. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for your patience.
Are you watching your own stream, Madam Chair?
You're on mute now. You muted yourself.
I'm still muted. You're muted. Oh, she's gone now. Who's the vice chair of this committee?
It's Feldmark.
Well, I was going to say someone has vice chair experience.
There we go. There we go. Okay. Thanks, everyone. I appreciate your patience. All right, let's go ahead and get started so we don't waste any more of your time. Sorry about that. House Bill 745, election law, post-election tabulation audits, risk limiting audits. This bill does have some amendments, but I wanted to go over quickly. We did pass this as a part of another bill last year out of the House. And this bill is a little bit different this year. So just as a reminder to everyone, after every election, we conduct our auditing process to make sure that the outcome is accurate and that there aren't any discrepancies. A risk limited audit is widely considered the gold standard of election audits. And it's an audit procedure. It looks at the chance that if there was a full manual count of the paper records, that there would not be a different outcome. So in a risk limiting audit, randomly chosen batches of paper ballots in a contest are examined until it's determined that a full manual count would not have a different outcome. And we keep examining paper records until it's statistically determined that the outcome of the election would not be different. Stan, do you have any other background on risk limiting audits that you wanted to add to that for the good of the subcommittee?
Not particularly, no. I think you described it well.
Perfect. I spent a lot of time trying to simplify it, so hopefully that made some sense, everyone. Does the vice chair have a question or?
Yes, I do. I'm sorry, Madam Chair. I know we've had this bill multiple years, it seems like. Is that true?
Yes, that's true.
And what's the reason the Senate isn't passing it? Do we know?
I don't think there's a particular reason. I do think that in the House, we've done maybe a bit more of the education work and, making sure that members are fully understanding what the bill is and how it works and what risk limiting audits is. I think it's maybe a little bit more work that we have to do to make sure our Senate members are comfortable. So I don't have a specific reason, but hopefully this will be the year. So
we need to help the Senate read this great bill.
We might need to do that.
All right, thank you.
Before, if it's okay, Delegate Griffith, I just wanted Stan to share with us the amendments on the bill before we go into further discussion.
Sure, and I guess I just wanted to add, I did want to add one thing, which is the risk limit is important with risk limiting audits. So the risk limit is the maximum chance that a hand count, that the hand count would not be different. So anyway, I'll go ahead and do the amendments. So the amendments do a couple of things. It makes a technical correction on page 4. It just is one of the recommendations of our technical experts to refine the language to make it more accurate. The amendments also strike a provision on page 5, lines 11 and 12, that would have limited the automated software audit to 25% of the ballot styles. So the automated software audit would be able to continue to be performed on all ballots as it is currently done under this amendment. And then the amendment also adds sponsors, and that's the amendments.
All right, thank you, Stan. Delegate Griffith.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is a new guy to the subcommittee question. So is this for any election, or is this only for contested elections? Like if there's a dispute or it's too close, things of that nature.
So,
Go
I'm
ahead.
sorry,
Stan.
go ahead,
No, you
Madam
go
Chair.
ahead, Stan.
So under the bill, it would be up to the state board to select the contest for audit, and the bill requires that there be a audit of at least one statewide contest and one local contest in each county, but it would be up to the state board to select the contest that would be audited, and they could consider whatever criteria they wished.
Okay, thank you.
And I'm not sure if I've said this already, but the bill would pilot after the upcoming general election after November, just to sort of test out risk limiting audits, and then it would be used after our elections moving forward. Delegate Feldmark.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just have one clarifying question on the amendment, Stan. So we're striking the limit of not more than 25% of the ballot styles for the automated audit, right?
Mm-hmm.
But so the state board can choose how many they want to do in the automated audit. Is that correct? It's just up to their discretion?
I think that's fair to say, because the automated audit itself is optional under the bill, whereas it's required under current law.
And I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
No, so I think it's fair to say that they could choose to do less than all of the ballots if that was what they chose to do.
Okay, but the number of automated audits they choose to do does not impact what they're required to do in terms of risk limiting audits.
No, and the current practice is to do an automated audit of all the ballots, and that would continue to be an option under this bill. It just wouldn't be required. But but yeah, that doesn't affect at all the requirement
the risk limiting. Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Why don't we entertain a motion on the amendments?
Move favorable.
Second.
All right, the amendments have been properly moved and seconded. Any discussion on the bill amendments? Delegate Griffith. Oh, all right. Hearing no discussion, all those in favor of the bill amendments, say aye or raise your hand. All right. Any opposed? All right, the amendments to the bill pass. Now on the bill as amended, House Bill 745.
Move the bill as amended.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and properly seconded. All in favor of House Bill 745 as amended, raise your hand or say.
There's a question, Madam Chair, on the bill.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Delegate Griffith?
Yes, thank you. Do you remember what the vote was on this last year by any chance? The committee vote?
It was unanimous.
All right, very good,
Both in
thanks.
committee and on the floor.
Thank you.
All of those are unanimous, Delegate Griffith.
We've been a very bipartisan subcommittee this year, I will say. So all those in favor of House Bill 745 as amended, raise your hand or say aye. All right, those opposed. Delegate Long is opposed. All right, House Bill 745 passes. Next up, we have House Bill 340, Election Law, Campaign Finance Enforcement. This bill also has amendments, and I do want to walk us through this bill a little bit. The bill language as drafted is a tad bit confusing, so let's make sure that we understand the different pieces of it. And I want to ask Mr. Demarinis to feel free to jump in as needed to help make sure that we're getting all of the information. So the first part of the bill is about our political committees. And this part of the bill, so these are our campaign committees, this part of the bill looks at making sure that the civil penalties are very similar and that it's sort of playing cleanup around civil penalties and other aspects of the bill. So one of the pieces of the bill under our campaign committee is that it makes the prohibition provisions consistent regarding all outstanding civil penalties and non-compliant actions by a political actor. An aspect of that is that it makes all of the maximum civil penalties the same. It makes all the maximum penalties $1,000. So that's just consistent. And so, for example, as you all know, the way that the Board of Elections does the penalties, that there's usually a first offense, second offense, third offense. So that is still in place. It's not raising those, which are they're outlined in Kumar, but it's just saying that for all of those penalties, the maximum is the same. So it's not confusing. Some are 500, some are 1,000, making them all the same. It also prohibits an individual from becoming a candidate, treasurer, nominee, or assume office if they have outstanding unpaid civil penalties by SBE. Do not be able to become a candidate, treasurer, or nominee, or assume office if you have outstanding unpaid civil penalties. Are there any questions on this campaign committee section before we move on? And actually, I'll go to Jared first to see if there's anything I missed critical.
No, that was pretty across the board. Excellent. I just wanted to mention that about the outstanding civil penalties. Right now, current law prohibits, a person from becoming a candidate, treasurer, nominee, or assume office if they have unpaid late filing fees or a failure to file. So this basically is just to keep in line with the General Assembly policy that you must be in good standing in order to become one of those, political actors.
All right, thank you, Mr. Demarinis. Okay, businesses who have contracts over $200,000 with the state. So we just talked about the candidate committee provisions of the bill. Now we're moving on to businesses who have contracts over $200,000 with the states. And these are businesses that are maybe making campaign contributions. The bill clarifies that SBE has the authority to fine a non-compliant business in the same manner and method as for a late filing by a political committee. It also gives express authority to the Office of the State Prosecutor to pursue civil penalties against non-compliant businesses as well. The maximum fine in the original bill for these types of businesses was $10,000. I believe in the Senate, they put that down to $5,000. And we have an amendment that would make the bill the same as the Senate, capping that the maximum fine at $5,000. And it also increases criminal penalties against non-compliant businesses from $1,000 to $25,000. So those are the pieces in terms of the businesses, the main pieces so far for the businesses who have contracts with over $200,000 with the state. Mr. Demarinis, anything to add on that?
I just wanted to mention that the $25,000 civil criminal penalty, it's a criminal penalty, is the exact same criminal penalty that you, as your committees, face for the same type of a criminal action for failing to disclose contributions. And so this is identical to what the same sort of level of activity and fine structure that basically political committees face without having all the attorneys that a business that usually has in-house counsel or has access to attorneys because they have contracts of $200,000 or more is facing. So yes.
All right, perfect. Any questions on that section? All right, the third sort of major area of the bill deals with businesses that employ lobbyists, and it conforms these businesses with contracts with the state that employ state lobbyists to have the similar provisions to what I just previously talked about with those who have contracts with the state. If a business employs a lobbyist, we know that that business has to file a campaign finance report with the state to report their political contributions. The bill requires record retention for 3 years. And Mr. Demarinis, I'll ask you to say more about that and what it means. It also, again, increases the criminal penalties from $1,000 to $25,000 for those businesses. And it grants the State Board of Elections civil enforcement authority.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. So the record retention is basically that these businesses have to just retain that, who made contributions, or that they sent around emails to their employees to ask whether or not they made contributions to state officials such as governor, lieutenant governor, AG, members of the General Assembly, comptroller. So that's very similar to the same type of record retention policies that you have for political committees, as well as businesses that have contracts with the state and other government entities. And the Civil Enforcement Authority is just basically the same sort of authority that we have currently. The State Board has in Title 13 going after some technical violations. That is for fine structures, the civil penalties there. And the $25,000 again it's just for criminal penalties as well. So it makes it uniform across the board for all disclosure filers.
Thank you. So that's the recap of the bill. What it basically is doing is just making our enforcement a little bit more uniform, making it more consistent, and making sure that SBE and Office of the Prosecutor has the actual tools that they need for folks who are bad actors. Any questions on the bill?
Madam Chair?
Yes,
Oh, I think Delegate Feldmark had a question first.
Delegate Feldmark.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just for a little more clarification on the businesses that are required to report. So they have the responsibility for gathering the information from their employees to then report to the board, correct? And
Mr.
Yes,
Demarais.
Madam Chair, you want me to answer this? So yes, I just want, yes. So the current law, any business that has a contract of $200,000 or more still has to go around, asks its level, and it's not like every employee, it's only like officers, directors, partners. It's that level of standard there.
Right.
Directors are like board of directors, partners, VPs, president. So basically, in a nutshell, senior management at that level.
Okay.
And then they have to go around and survey them and say, did you make any contributions to Maryland candidates? If so, then we have to disclose that activity.
So I guess my question is, when we get into the penalty for if that's not done, right? It's one thing if the business doesn't take responsibility for that and do that, but it's another thing if the information they get is incomplete. And so I'm just wondering, how does that, like?
So, I mean, that all goes into the same sort of things that like a campaign has, right? They have they always have the ability to amend. We've always said that. They have reports to file. This has nothing to do with that. So the criminal activity would be as if they intentionally, knowingly, and willfully neglected this. And let me just say this is a contractual obligation. Every state contract has boilerplate language that says that they must comply with Title 14 of the election law article in here. So this is not something where we're making it any onerous on them. And the idea that it's a high contract. And for everyone here, I just wanted to make sure $200,000 is also the level that has to be approved at the BPW. That's why it's this. So the state has deemed that type of contract level a significant level to have that type of requirement.
Okay, thank you.
Vice Chair Washington, did you still have a question?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Madam Chair. Hey, Jared, can you define what business entity means?
Basically, it's any sort of concern that that has a contract with a government. For this purposes here, it's anybody that has a contract with a state or a local government entity.
Oh, I mean, but
it's for procurement only too. So it's the state has to procure their services, and there's other exemptions too, like Medicare. So it's not like doctors or individuals or anything.
yeah, but does it include nonprofits that enter an agreement with let's say the housing CDBG program, and their executives or whomever donate money to a candidate? it's above 200,000, will they count as a nonprofit?
So nonprofits, if the board of directors are unpaid, then their contributions are not attributed to the entity, the nonprofit entity. Only paid staff, like the executive director of that, would be, and that's still, once again, just for procurement. So if it received a grant from the county or from the state, then that would not be a procurement of services. So that would be, they wouldn't have to file under Title 14.
So if they went through a procurement program for, I mean, there's a nonprofit I know in my district that goes after DHCD grants through the Economic Development Fund that we created, and their executive director, is over $200,000, and their executive director donates money. Will they fall under this? I mean, it's not. I don't know if that's I don't know. I'm not sure if that's a procurement because they submit their proposal to the government, to the department, and then they receive the grant funds after that, right? And these are for capital dollars. And I'm just trying to define to see who we're trying. I understand that there's other entities. I'm trying to make sure that this doesn't, either current law or this bill doesn't cover nonprofit. If it does cover nonprofits,
I think the current law has a nonprofit exemption that has worked well. I can talk to you offline about whether or not that is particularly a procurement. It doesn't sound like a procurement. It sounds more like applying for a grant, and that would not be under this here. It has to be some sort of service or property that the state is acquiring for it, not necessarily.
Yeah, if you can say
like in your case, they're more of a grant for to help to provide services. That's not a procurement.
Or if it's a grant for a nonprofit building a new building or a new housing complex or any of those entities. I mean, they're
right. That would not be that. It would be something else. Like if the state was buying land from a nonprofit, or that would be something that's a procurement. But in your scenario there, they all look like they're just getting grants from it and go through a different process.
Got it. Okay. We should figure that out. I would like to know because it seems unclear still. The other piece about it is, from my understanding, look, we're not judiciary, but this thing in this bill says a lot about it directs a district court to do several different things. Can we do that, Stan? Can we say what the district court has to do? They have to, give them a citation, make them pay a penalty. It says they shall, shall apply for evidentiary standards as provided by law. There's so many shells for the district court, and I wondered if we are crossing the lines of separate entities of government here. Can you just explain that for me?
Sure. Yeah, no, that's a good question. But this is actually, those provisions that you're looking at are actually current law for election law violations under Title 13.
Awesome.
And are in turn modeled on civil penalty process for municipalities.
Got it. Okay. I think overall, I think it's a good bill. I do wonder if, because it's an election year and we're talking about these entities, and we're talking about sometimes small businesses. I wonder what does SBE plan to do to notify them of this new process and this new law if they're doing business. I know that we have a list of entities already, and I wonder what's the notification process for some of these folks to be able to know that this is the new rules, these are the new penalties, blah blah blah. Not the candidate piece because that's different, but just these business entities.
So we notify it through the subsection of the MD Chris system, since they're all registered anyway. So we give them updates through that, saying that this is the new penalty procedures there. And then we can also, we always get data from some of the government entities as well. So we kind of work with some of the counties and tell them, their procurement officers as well, to say, these are also some of the new penalties and provisions for, possibly for your entities that you procure services from. So, we basically make sure that all the the stakeholders are notified as broad as possible.
To be clear, it's not in the bill to notify them, but
Right.
that's a practice that you guys do.
We always do that. Yeah, at the end here, I was kind of even sending like a little newsletter to all political committees going, this is going to affect you. You may want to look at that as well. So.
Got it. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, Chair. It's Dan.
Thank you. And I also want to mention that I believe judiciary secondary on this bill, so they will also have the opportunity to review it regarding those provisions. Delegate Lasanti.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'm not sure who's appropriate for my questions, but I want to dig down a little bit deeper here. This bill, when you say that it impacts local government, that is county and municipal governments, their contracts, is that right?
Title 14 goes across the board, yes.
Okay. Obviously, we want compliance. We don't want people to get into trouble. So I think that has to be an important piece to this. But when you're raising a fee, I mean, a fine from $1,000 to $25,000, that's huge, especially on a $200,000 contract. And I share some of the concerns I think that the vice chair was expressing as far as grant agencies and things like that, like the Heritage Area Program.
Those are not, sir. Those are not.
They're not, but they have contracts certain contracts with the state that have some provisions that do outline political activity and things like that. So I want to be sure that that's not going to impact their contract.
Right now, nothing would impact that under this bill for current law. Because right now, the nonprofits that have to disclose still have to disclose. This is
Right.
basically an enforcement. So there's nothing that I'm putting any more burden on entities that are procuring, that are having contracts with state, local, or county government.
Okay.
This bill here is just to help with the enforcement of the current law, especially.
Are you having problems with enforcement?
Yes.
I mean, okay.
Yes. So the state prosecutor's office will only initiate actions under criminal provisions, meaning, and that's where the $25,000 comes in. That
Right.
is willfully and knowingly violating this law. That is a higher standard.
Mhm.
What they're asking and what this bill does is it makes it so that we have civil penalties to go after violations. So if they fail to file a report, if they forget to file an amendment, these are all things that would be then handled civilly with them, just like the civil penalties that are imposed upon political committees for their disclosure. So
Okay.
This is just helping the current filers and basically the current program to be enforced. So this is just implementing the will of the General Assembly that was passed in the past. Additionally, the $25,000 this is a criminal penalty. This is the same criminal penalty that your political committees face.
Right.
So, your treasurer and chair, if they willfully and knowingly, fail to file or do some sort of action, that's the $25,000 penalty that they're facing. A business, right, that has a $200,000 contract, right now, their current penalty for knowingly and willfully not disclosing activity is $1,000. That is, that's the difference there. And to make it so that it's $25,000 across the board.
Okay. One last thing about that. And you said that you send updates of law changes by email. Is that right?
We post them in MD Chris sometimes. Yes, right.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think not to tell you how to do this, but I really think that we rely too heavily on email when we change major policy, and particularly things that have an economic or a criminal penalty. So I'd like, and I don't think that we need to do this as an amendment to the bill, but I certainly wish that you would consider some more formal information or notification to these businesses, because and I understand the difference between a criminal issue or something that is done willfully or a mistake, but it's a very serious fine. It's a very serious penalty, and I just want to make sure that the email goes to the right person and they are well aware of this law if it changes.
Thank you, Delegate Lasanti. Delegate Griffith.
Thank you, Madam Chair. How does this impact, or is it redundant when it comes to labor unions who negotiate massive contracts with government entities? Is there already provisions in there, or does
labor
this
unions,
have to-
unless the state procures a service from a labor union, this has nothing to do. I guess that's part of Title 14. Title 14 is basically Maryland's pay-to-play law. It was about businesses that have contracts that go in front of the Board of Public Works or go in front of county and municipalities that the state is procuring services from of $200,000 or more. Labor unions are not under this because the state is not procuring services from the labor union. They make up the workforce.
All right, thank you.
All right, thank you so much for the great questions. Definitely a lot of questions on this bill. We may need to just sit on it for a little bit to make sure that everyone is comfortable and understands it. Mr. Demarinis, though, for context, before we move forward, if you can just say a little bit more, especially as it relates to the businesses, about why this is needed, challenges that you all are having with enforcement, so that we can just have a little bit more context for the need for the bill.
Sure. And this bill that part has come up in the past in past sessions as well. The state prosecutor and we go through, well, let me back up, I'm sorry. When we had in 2013, 2014, we passed a comprehensive campaign reform package, which basically included fining businesses that fail to file these contribution disclosure statements. And these contribution disclosure statements is to list out the officers and directors and partners, their political contributions in the state of Maryland. At the time when that law was passed, it said that the state board shall fine them in the same method and manner as in Title 13. When the state prosecutor took it over, when we started referring these matters to them, they didn't feel as though that they had express authorization to seek civil penalties from that language. So when we would send over non-compliant businesses to them, they were not going to enforce or basically seek civil penalties. They would send a letter saying, if you do this again, we will then charge you criminally for this activity here. So what we have then is an issue where we're having difficulty, one, making sure that businesses are timely filing, because the ones that are not timely filing are just, their penalties are just not being enforced. And at this point here, it's just to make sure that we want to ensure disclosure and in a timely fashion here. These reports are filed twice a year, May and in November. There's tons of notifications that are sent to them the same way that the notification is sent that we send to Title 13 filers. And it is the same structure that the lobbyists who usually are employed by these businesses, that's their filing period as well. So a lot of people are already well aware of the May, November filing periods for these businesses here. And again, it's a contractual obligation that they have to disclose this activity at the time. And with that, it's just been difficulty with enforcement to make sure that when we have non-compliant actors, there is no real fight or real punishment for non-compliance. And that's where we're kind of stuck. But thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Definitely appreciate that. For today, we're going to go ahead and hold this bill so that committee members can continue to review and also to get any questions answered for Mr. Damaris and others if you have them. So Mr. Damaris, if there's any follow-up information, such as information about nonprofits and who wouldn't apply that you're able to share, if you can send that along,
Sure.
that would be very helpful.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Elliot Long.
Yes, after I got my phone working finally, I was looking at my notes on HB 0745. Change that to a yay.
Okay, no problem.
I can't remember all these votes. I keep them on my phone.
No problem. We're glad to be unanimous once again. So we'll make sure that's reflected.
Thank you.
Great. So moving on to House Bill 707, the deadline for selection of a lieutenant governor. What this bill does is it changes the timeline to select the LG candidate. A gubernatorial candidate seeking the nomination would designate a candidate for LG 21 days after the primary election under this bill. This bill has no amendments, and we have passed it previously in the House. Are there any questions or comments on this bill? Mr. Vice Chair.
What would happen if they don't? If they don't select the lieutenant governor candidate within the 21 days?
Mr. Damaris.
Well, then they would probably be in violation of the Constitution, and then it would be declared a vacancy in that point there. I mean, like, this would be considered a constitutional requirement.
How far until this aligned with the presidential selection of when they have to select their vice president?
So, normally we would have a June primary. So, this would put it somewhere in July, the 21 days. Conventions are July, August. I mean, they bounce around, but you see when they are. So it's kind of the same sort of, time period at that point.
Okay, I just wondered. I mean, I was trying to be funny, but it actually is a serious question.
Exactly.
So I guess my possible concern is that we don't know what's going to happen if they don't choose one. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Delegate Lasanti.
You, Madam Chair. And I mean, this bill's kind of interesting to me because I remember when we set the current requirement last term that required the gubernatorial candidate to select their lieutenant governor at the time of filing, which was the first time we've changed that in probably since the first lieutenant governor. It's been a long time since we've filed that, since we've changed that. So I'm trying to figure out what's happened since the last time that has created this desire to change the process again.
Stan looks like he wants to jump in. Go ahead, Stan.
Say that the requirement that the candidate for governor name a candidate for lieutenant governor at the time of filing goes back to the creation of the office of lieutenant governor back in, I think, 1970 or 71. And it's in the Constitution. So that's been there for a long time. And I think the sponsor's intent is to basically open up the opportunity for more persons to be selected for lieutenant governor, including persons who may have run for other offices in the primary, and whether they were successful or unsuccessful in getting those nominations. I think that's what the sponsor was aiming to do.
So we didn't change anything we didn't change anything recently?
So that had to do with vacancies on the ticket after the filing deadline.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for the it's there, but I thank you for the clarification.
Thank you. Delegate Feldmark.
So thank you, Madam Chair. My question actually relates to that legislation we did about filling vacancies. And just my memory is fuzzy. So if there is a vacancy in the lieutenant governor position, does the governor candidate get to name the replacement? Or if it's after the primary, does that responsibility go to the party? I guess that's probably a question for, well, either Stan or Jared. I don't know.
Yeah, I'll let Jared take that one.
It's the governor. The governor gets to choose their vacancy. If it's
the
in
governor-
time, right?
The governor, the candidate for governor.
Right.
Right,
If
okay,
you're-
yeah.
And then there's a time when it can be on the ballot and not on the ballot as well.
Okay.
Depending on when it occurs and everything else.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? Vice Chair.
Sorry, last question, Madam Chair. So why 21 days? Is that enough time to vet someone to make sure that they're like credible enough to be on the ballot with them? Yeah, I just wonder if that's enough time, right? To choose someone that's going to be your running mate, right? Like you're just celebrating, you're about to, looking for someone. Obviously, you might be in the background looking at people, but you never know. So I just wonder if 21 days is enough time.
I don't think the sponsor of the bill is here, but the 21 days is what's before us now. So I think we're going to vote on the 21 days after the primary. I'm not sure we know exactly why.
I moved the bill, Madam Chair.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and properly seconded. Any discussion on the bill? All right, hearing none. All those in favor of House Bill 707, raise your hand or say aye.
Aye.
All right, any opposed? Seeing no opposition, House Bill 707 passes the subcommittee. I am going to hold House Bill 1093, and we're going to move on to our last bill of the day, which is House Bill 683, Anne Arundel County Republican Central Committee elections. What this bill does is for Anne Arundel County, their Republican Central Committee, it changes from 3 to 2 members elected from each council district. This was requested by some members who represent that area. And I think we either passed this or something similar last year. Are there any questions on this bill? Delegate Long.
Was there a delegation letter with this?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I'm good.
All right. Do we have a motion on the bill?
Move favorable.
Can we get a second? All right, it's been moved and properly seconded. Any discussion? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor of House Bill 683, raise your hand or say aye. Okay, any opposed? All right, House Bill 683 passes the subcommittee. Thank you everyone for your patience earlier and also for the great questions and discussion. Again, we probably will have House Bill 340 come back up again in some form. So please take the time to go ahead and review and get your questions answered. I think Education Subcommittee is meeting next, and then we will have voting sometime later today. But thank you everyone for the hard work, and I'll see y'all later. Bye-bye.